Thank you all for joining us this morning. We're just waiting for a few more participants to join us and then we'll get started. Good morning all. Thank you for joining us. Commissioners, I'm now turning on the ability to start your video and audio.
Well, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, good morning.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's always a pleasure to see everybody. So let's, we might as well go ahead and get started. We got about 3 minutes after 10. It's perfect. So this is the implementation review hearing on the California Rebuilding Fund, our meeting of Thursday, March 24th, 2002. I'm Pedro Nava. I'm chair of the Little Hoover Commission, and thank you all for joining us today. I want to introduce the other commissioners who are here with us on Zoom. Our vice chair, Sean Varner, commissioners Dion Aroner, David Byer, former Senator Anthony Cannella, welcome, Senator, Bill Emerson, Gil Garcetti, and Jana Sidley. We're also joined by Senator Jim Nielsen.
I'm here.
I see you, my friend. Now, in that this is former Senator Cannella's first meeting, why don't I just open the mic up and ask him if he has any remarks that he would like to make to the commissioners, and welcome, sir.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I was the Senate designee for the Little Hoover Commission for a couple of years, so I do have some exposure, and I really appreciate the work that the commission does, and I'm excited to be a part of it, and hopefully I can contribute. So thank you.
Yeah, well, we look forward to your contribution, and welcome again. We also have our commission staff, Executive Director Ethan Rarick, Project Managers Crystal Beckham and Tristan Stein, along with analyst Sherry McAllister, Ashley Hurley, and Rachel Mattioli. Let me do a little bit of housekeeping before we get to our subject. The commissioner's audio and video will be turned on throughout the duration of the hearing. Commissioners, you may mute yourself if you wish. Please remember, of course, to unmute yourself if you want to make a comment or ask a question during the hearing. The video and audio of our hearing witnesses will be turned on when it is their opportunity to speak. Members of the public will be muted during the hearing. We'll have a public comment session at the end. Those who wish to make a comment will be unmuted during the public comment session. If you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom by clicking on the hand icon to join our public comment queue. Those who have joined us by phone may send an email to Little Hoover at lhc.ca.gov. I suspect at some point we'll put that up on the board, indicating that you want to address the commission. Please provide a phone number from which you have joined so that we know who to unmute. Staff will be monitoring raised hands and emails requesting comment throughout the duration of the hearing. As is usual, public comment is limited to 3 minutes per speaker. And there is the information, either the raised hand or the email. We are recording today's hearing, and afterwards, staff will place a permanent link to the recording on our website and upload it to the YouTube channel and the Facebook page. So now let's talk about our subject today. This is a follow-up hearing about the California Rebuilding Fund, an innovative loan fund designed to support small business in underserved communities throughout the state. By aggregating funding from private, philanthropic, and public sector sources, this fund aims to provide businesses the capital they need to build and grow in the aftermath of the COVID pandemic. In our December 2020 report on COVID and small business recovery, the Commission found that the Rebuilding Fund was a notable example of public-private partnership. As part of our recommendations, we urge the governor and the legislature to expand and build upon this program if its initial results were promising. Today's hearing will focus on the Rebuilding Fund's implementation, as well as areas for improvement. We'll hear perspectives on this important program from 3 experts who are dedicated to helping small business thrive in California. And before we move into that, I do want to take a moment to congratulate staff for, once again, the extraordinary work that they did in putting this report together. One of the things that Little Hoover does, I think, probably better than other places that I've seen, is the original work. If you look in the documentation that was pulled together for this meeting, you'll see the tables. I don't think those tables exist anywhere else other than what staff has done to put the information together. Similarly, when we did a report on some of the COVID rescue monies, staff put together original documents and not reports, but tables that made it really very easy for anyone to take a look at where the money came from, how it was spent, and who received it. Staff has done that again with the paperwork that is in front of us. And I think that that is a huge step in transparency and making it easy for everybody to understand what we are doing, and especially in the case of the Rebuilding Fund, what they have been doing. This hearing was organized by Project Manager Tristan Stein and Analyst Rachel Mattioli. And I'd like to ask Rachel if you would please be so kind to introduce our first witness.
Thank you so much, Chair Nava, and good morning, Commissioners. Our first witness today is Mr. Scott Wu. Mr. Wu is the Executive Director of California's Infrastructure and Economic Development Bank, also known as IBank, which houses the Rebuilding Fund. Mr. Wu was appointed to this role by Governor Newsom in 2019. Prior to that, Mr. Wu spent many years leading and advising teams focused on financing beneficial and innovative solutions to large-scale public sector issues. He has also co-founded several venture capital and investment firms that together manage billions of capital. Mr. Wu, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Whenever you're ready, you may please begin your testimony.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Commissioners, for this opportunity today to speak at this hearing, which serves, as we understand, as a follow-up to your thoughtful report from December of 2020 on saving small businesses. I am pleased to share the work that we've engaged in since the outset of the pandemic, including with the California Rebuilding Fund, to support small businesses and to promote an equitable recovery. The California Infrastructure and Economic Development Bank, commonly known as IBank, is the state's general purpose finance authority and houses the Small Business Finance Center. IBank's mission involves promoting economic development, revitalizing communities, and enhancing the quality of life for all Californians. And our current priorities emphasize creating jobs, reaching underserved communities, and addressing climate change. IBank is primarily supported by the revenues generated from our activities, rather than by annual state general fund appropriations. In fact, prior to the pandemic, IBank had not received state general funds since our original capitalization in 1999. Your report emphasizes the critical need for state government to work boldly to address structural inequalities via public-private partnerships. You highlight two key elements: supporting financial institutions such as CDFIs that serve underserved communities, and developing programs that help small businesses survive and retool for a changed economic landscape. For IBank, such principles are at the core to the operations of all of our small business programs. We design our programs to increase access to the underserved, reduce their cost of funds, and to crowd in private sector capital by sharing risk. Through our partnership with a statewide network of financial development corporations, IBank's small business programs engage over 100 of the state's community-based lenders, including over 30 CDFIs. Unlike grant programs, which may come and go depending on access to ongoing appropriations, IBank's programs are built on responsible and sustainable business practices that ensure public financing will remain available long-term into the future. This applies to our flagship small business loan guarantee program that has been in service since 1968 and has supported over $2.5 billion of financings since 2013 with very limited capital. Creatively applying public-private partnerships to meet evolving market needs and address disadvantaged communities will be central to several new programs and initiatives that IBank currently has underway, such as our Climate Tech Small Business Guarantees, our recently launched Climate Catalyst Loan Fund, and our new state venture capital program in process. 2 years ago this month, at the outset of the pandemic, IBank sprang into action to address the economic crisis, immediately launching a COVID-19 microloan guarantee offering with a group of participating CDFIs to bring immediate relief to underserved business owners and those unable to access federal PPP loans. Nearly 2,000 micro businesses who average under 5 employees have utilized this initiative to save or create nearly 10,000 jobs. 86% of these businesses are female or minority owned, or they're located in low to moderate income tracts. As the pandemic continued and the lending community serving disadvantaged populations continued to run short of capital, it became clear that offsetting risk for CDFIs to undertake lending during a crisis would not be sufficient, and that we would need to help drive larger pools of capital to the CDFI community. IBank surveyed the market and worked closely with the governor's task force on business and jobs recovery to help formulate and evaluate what became the California Rebuilding Fund. IBank provided the $25 million anchor investment for the launch of this innovative public-private partnership that brought together state and local governments, philanthropy, foundations, impact investors, corporations, and commercial banks, a broad coalition appropriate for the scale of the challenge. Later, to help the Rebuilding Fund meet its minimum capital threshold to begin operations, IBank provided an additional $12.5 million of first loss capital to enable the low interest loans to the smallest of California's small businesses. Every new program faces challenges. Additional funding rounds of PPP were made available, and only a few weeks following the launch of the Rebuilding Fund, the introduction of the California Small Business Relief Grant Program that ultimately exceeded $4 billion of microgrants understandably suppressed the number of small business owners who were interested in loans, even with the extremely low interest rates. Promoting a loan fund while significant grant funds have remained available has been difficult. However, with grant funds expiring, we are collaborating with the Rebuilding Fund to engage a new round of outreach and to address this challenge in a number of ways. We have engaged Lendistry, which administer California's relief grants to small businesses, to promote the Rebuilding Fund to more than 400,000 small business owners who applied for grants. This outreach has already significantly increased applications matched with CDFIs. Additionally, we have collaborated with the Rebuilding Fund regarding simplifying the application process, expanding eligibility requirements, and expanding outreach to community and business associations, to local government bodies and other state agencies to help promote the program. IBank continues to assist and support the California Rebuilding Fund to reach its targets and stands ready with additional capacity to support this initiative as appropriate and once it achieves its original goals on both its utilization and leverage of private capital. To further support California small businesses, IBank, along with the California State Treasurer's Office, is also working to draw California's share of the federal state small business credit initiative dollars to serve small businesses through all of our existing programs and to consider new initiatives being developed that best meet market needs as the economic situation continues to evolve and stabilize. IBank will remain flexible and adaptable to be positioned to quickly act when a need or opportunity arises to better serve small businesses and advance an equitable long-term recovery from the pandemic. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for that testimony. I see that, and what you'll find, Mr. Wu, is that commissioners. Sometimes you were lucky you didn't get interrupted, but most of the time, commissioners, having been read the material, will just launch out into a question, and we actually encourage that, and that I consider that to be a compliment with respect to the speaker. But I see Commissioner Byer has his hand raised, and if you would be so kind, Commissioner.
Thank you, and thank you to Scott Wu, whose background is amazing, and it's a great pleasure to talk to you again. I have a couple questions. Let me start with maybe the largest one in terms of dollar amounts. That is the SSBCI, which for fellow commissioners who may not have followed all of this, is a program that originated in the Great Recession, 2009, 2010. And the money went back then to IBank and to the State Treasurer's Office. And as I understand it, somewhere between $800 and $900 million is expected to go to the state of California in this tranche. What I'd like you to address is what's the process by which the money is going to be allocated between GoBiz, IBank, and the State Treasurer's Office? What criteria are going to be used? And how are we going to be sure that the state is ready to spend the money in a way that's additive, not duplicative of other programs like the yet to be launched venture fund?
Yeah, so there are several components to that question. So the original SSBCI, we call it SSBCI 1.0, was from the Jobs Act of 2010. In 2011 and 12, both IBank and the State Treasurer's Office received half of the state share of $168 million. This time around, as part of the American Rescue Plan of last year, $1.2 billion has been allocated to the state. And so the State Treasurer's Office and IBank will again split that $1.2 billion, roughly $591 million each, for both existing and new programs. Separately, you mentioned GoBiz. Cal OSBA is awaiting the guidelines to be issued for the applications relating to the technical assistance programs and for those funds to be allocated. That will largely be administered through Cal OSBA at GoBiz. The venture capital program, the state venture capital program, is one of the 5 programs allowed by US Treasury under SSBCI. And so we've decided to utilize a portion of the state's allocation this time around, up to $200 million, to launch a state venture capital program for underrepresented venture managers as well as entrepreneurs.
Well, let me ask a follow-up question, or a couple of them, I guess. In the past, another state agency, CalPERS, spent a lot of money on venture. And I come from the venture business. That's what I do. So there were issues, favoritism and other misapplication of those funds. What safeguards are going to be used by the various state agencies to prevent the replication of those problems in the past? And how are you going to assure us and the public that underrepresented communities are going to get a fair shake?
Sure. As you are well aware, CalPERS, CalSTRS, the UC Berkeley pensions, all the public pensions in California have significant allocations to the venture capital asset category. We, unlike the other states in the nation under SSBCI 1, did not partake in a venture capital program for California. 38 states and jurisdictions did take part in venture capital using SSBCI 1.0 funds. With 2.0 funds, as I've mentioned, we plan to allocate up to $200 million. We are currently designing the process by which those funds will be managed and administered. We're currently designing the process in our application in a back and forth with US Treasury as to the appropriate methodology by which selection will take place. As I mentioned, we did not believe that California needs a general venture capital program. Many of the other states are lacking venture capital altogether, and therefore they use the Treasury funds to just launch a general purpose high-tech and other venture capital programs. We're focused here on using the capital specifically for the underrepresented and underserved investors, entrepreneurs, and underserved regions of California that don't see much venture capital in their communities. And so our entire program is designed for the explicit purpose of underrepresented, underserved, and disadvantaged. And we will, as we go, be sure to put together a process that leverages appropriate committees, investment committees, and third-party consultants and program managers to make sure that we don't incur instances of favoritism.
Thank you. Last question. The staff put together useful information about the successes of San Francisco and the mayor and the board of supervisors in terms of leveraging the rebuilding fund. And I know some other jurisdictions have begun that process. If you had the capability of directing resources, is there more that the state could do to encourage local jurisdictions to do what San Francisco and some other places have done to leverage the rebuilding fund?
Yeah, and I think Calvert will speak to this as they administer the rebuilding fund, and they've engaged with various jurisdictions throughout the state. But it was our hope, and it continues to be our hope, that we were putting up the anchor investment to lead into this process in which we could engage with jurisdictions throughout the state to also pitch in local resources and to drive both demand and supply of capital within their communities. And so we did not see this to be targeted towards any particular community other than the underrepresented and the disadvantaged and the smallest of small businesses where there was the greatest need as a result of the pandemic dislocations. And so our goal was to have a statewide program with statewide reach and to funnel money to the most disadvantaged and the neediest communities, wherever they might be, with participation with as many local jurisdictions as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Varner.
Thank you, Mr. Wu. I appreciate your testimony. I appreciate all that you do for the state with IBank. I think it's an amazing concept. I'd like to drill down a little bit further on what Commissioner Byer was speaking about, and that's, you've made a lot of mention about serving the underserved and disadvantaged communities. And I come from Riverside, San Bernardino counties. I was born and raised in San Bernardino, and I live in Riverside now. And my concern is that the programs that IBank is fostering we just don't know about it out here. So what is the marketing outreach, and how do we how do our communities understand what you're doing, and how do we get access to those, and whether there's engagement with the local governments out here to get them more informed and do some outreach on that basis, and also whether we could use community foundations or something of that sort to get the outreach out there to these communities.
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's a very good point. Unlike many other finance institutions, we don't have a line item for marketing or outreach, right? And so we don't have a budget for it. We have to do this at a grassroots level. We do this through our partnerships. And so primarily we have a statewide network of 7 financial development corporations under contract with IBank that work and cover the entire state. They cover your region, they cover all the regions of the state. And there are primary point parties as partners into the lending communities of the state. And so we have 7 financial development corporations, as I mentioned, over 100 participating lenders throughout the state, over 30 CDFIs throughout the state. And so we need to do a better job, obviously, of getting the word out. We've tried to do that specifically through webinars, through community events. We work with various organizations such as Cameo, the Small Business Majority, many of the business associations throughout the state. Whenever we have the opportunity, we come out to the organizations and speak at their events and meetings. And so we would like to increase that activity, the outreach activity and the awareness. We started a campaign. We hired a new external affairs manager recently. And one of her priorities is to really put together a state outreach program. She's done a fabulous job of putting together some plans for this upcoming year. And so we'll continue to do more of that.
You know, I noticed that from as Commissioner Byer indicated, our staff put together a great memo. By the way, some of the writing of our staff is impeccable. It's just so well done, and I applaud them for that. All of us probably do a lot of reading on these materials in our various real jobs, and this is it's just a pleasure to see that. But so they identified a few things that were that I thought were really interesting, and maybe this is something we could expand on. Is as you mentioned, Commissioner Byer referenced San Francisco and also Santa Clara put up some funds to leverage the rebuilding fund. And I don't know exactly how that process worked or how that gave the rebuilding fund a little bit more notoriety in their communities, but is that something like the city of Riverside can do, or the city of San Bernardino might be able to do if they had more information on how that leveraging could work to bring those funds, or at least give exposure to those funds in those communities?
Yeah, and I will defer to Beth Bafford, who's speaking after me, who was on point with many of those conversations with local municipalities. In San Francisco was particularly effective because their contribution helped drive down the interest rate of the loans in the San Francisco community down to 0% interest. And so that made it particularly appealing for small businesses. Other counties and jurisdictions have contributed to the amounts that were made available for their particular jurisdictions. And so we are open to, we designed this entity to be flexible and available for local contributions. And we're hopeful that there will be more to come.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair Varner. I see Commissioner Garcetti has his hand up.
I do, and thank you, and good morning. Thank you, Mr. Wu, for being here. You and I have never met before, but I was impressed, greatly impressed with your background and certainly what you presented to the commission today in your written statement. I don't dare to really get into the venture part and the banking part because that's not my expertise in any way, but let me ask a somewhat political question, if I might. What is your goal for appearing today? What are the takeaways that you hope we walk away with that you might like to see in a report, assuming a report is going to be issued on this subject? I know that you testified before. I wasn't on the board then. Is there a different take you take on it now? Is there something you really want the board to emphasize that you think is of particular import?
Yeah, thank you for that question. My number one objective is to make sure that I'm responsive to your questions, concerns, your full understanding of what we're trying to accomplish here and how we're going about it. The things that I try to convey and to emphasize are that in the financial markets, we need to be flexible and adaptable. The situation changes quickly. I mean, for example, at the time that we launched this rebuilding fund, the 5-year interest rate on treasuries was 38 basis points. Yesterday it was 238 basis points. It was 600% higher. So the situation has changed. The interest rates that were available then are no longer available now in the marketplace. And so things have to be adaptable, flexible. We try to work with the rebuilding fund organizers to make sure the eligibility requirements can continue to evolve to accommodate the needs of the marketplace. And so as a whole, IBank looks at this holistically as a macro problem for small businesses throughout the state. We have various programs and funds that we shift from program to program when the needs arise. When there's a disaster, we shift more funds to the disaster area programs. When COVID occurred, we created a COVID initiative for the smallest of small businesses, because those are the ones that weren't able to tap into PPP. And so it's important for us to be able to have funds that we can move to the right area and program for the need as it arises, number one. Number two, as I mentioned in my opening statements, until the pandemic, IBank hadn't received funds since our initial capitalization back in the 90s, right? And so we need to have sustainable programs. It's important for us that when we create a program, when we support a program, that it has the opportunity to reach a level of stability and sustainability that it's evergreen, that it's continues to be available. It becomes permanent infrastructure for the small business community, rather than a program that comes and goes and in a short period of time. It takes time to develop a marketplace. It takes a long time to develop trusted partners in the financial community. And for them to rely on a program, they need to see that it's going to exist and continue, that it's not going to be here today and gone next year and come back and forth whenever new appropriations become available or a new situation arises. And so that's all, we always keep that in mind as we support and sustain the program.
Thank you. I have one follow-up question. My takeaway is you're emphasizing flexibility and stability. Focus for a second on flexibility. Do you feel you have sufficient flexibility at this point, or is there need for perhaps even more flexibility than you and your organization has now?
So we've sought flexibility each time in the emergency funding that transpired over the last year and a half, and from the general funds, when funds were proposed to be moved to or appropriated to the IBank, and therefore I feel comfortable with the level of flexibility that we were able to arrive at. With SSBCI, it's the US Treasury dictating how those funds can be spent and the programs that are available under their programs. And so they've provided and designed flexibility under 5 categories of programs that we could work with. And so that gives us a fair amount of latitude for the application that we recently submitted, and for any amended application that we would submit in the future if a new program idea or a new initiative came to light that would address a more pertinent need for us to shift into.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I do want to recognize Senator Min has joined us as well. Hello and welcome. I just have a thought. I'm looking to see if there's any other commissioners who want to raise a question or a comment with Mr. Wu. If you do, just let me know. But it just seems to me that that we ask programs like yours to accomplish significant things. And one of the areas that you find people asking you about, over which you have little control, seems to me to be outreach and marketing, particularly when you're not given any money to do that. And I think in fairness, as we evaluate performance of what you're doing, we have to be mindful of your ingenuity in identifying partners who are invested enough to do the outreach for you. It just seems to me that there's a failure to understand how things work in the real world if we expect you to find people and to make funds available, and then we expect you to find people of different ethnic backgrounds and different situations and bring them in and help them become sustainable when you're not given the money and the resources to put, it's such a tired phrase, boots on the ground, to actually knock on doors, make phone calls, send emails, and to have that kind of personal contact. You have talked a bit about how you identify partners that go out and do that. And I suspect when we speak with Miss Bafford with Calvert, that we're going to get additional information. But I just think there's a certain unfairness to asking you to meet certain goals when you're not given the full buffet of resources to do it. I don't expect you to respond to that. Sometimes when I say these sorts of things, I understand if you were to agree with me, you'd probably get a phone call from somebody that you wouldn't like. But I just think it's on our part, we need to be sensitive to some of the constraints that you have as we look at your program and what you're doing.
Well, I thank you for those sentiments. And, these types of hearings and support from organizations like yourself, having the governor's megaphone at the time of the launch and in an ongoing basis, working with GoBiz and the California Office of Small Business Advocate and their resources out in the field, out in their relationships, working through our FDCs, we just have to hustle and be creative. The thing we lack is marketing funds, but we don't lack marketing creativity. And so we could do a lot better job. We could do a lot more, and we will continue to try to do so. But we have to find the right partners, those that do have budgets, those that have like missions, and work with OSBA, work with the governor's office, work with the legislature and the external partners to try to get this out, because it's not just about making it known that this is available. It's also earning the trust of those communities that haven't historically had great trust in financial institutions.
Right.
And so to make sure that they understand what's being offered and that they know how to go about the process.
Right. Commissioner Byer.
Chairman Nava, I agree with what you're saying. I think Mr. Wu laid out a couple of things that I want to underline. One, Lendistry, which is a nonprofit who administered the grant funds and otherwise, is a great opportunity for partnership because they do have people who've applied for grants. That's the natural selection process of who might be interested in loans. So that program is important. Second, as I mentioned before, efforts like Santa Clara and San Francisco both accelerate the use of this kind of fund. The underlying problem, as Mr. Wu outlined, was the fund became available basically at the same time as a grant program.
Mm-hmm.
And free money is better than borrowed money. And that was maybe not an intentional effort, was a necessary effort given where we were in the pandemic. So the question now is, with the grant money expiring, how to leverage the CDFIs and community organizations. And this hearing is going to be one part of that. And I'm sure we're going to hear more about that from Ms. Bafford. But I think it would be a mistake to put any blame on Scott or his colleagues for what they were doing. They were scrambling to try and put together a complicated program. At the same time, there was a grant program. And I think that's the predominant reason there was less utilization on the ground.
Now, thank you for that clarifying information. Looking at my commissioners, I don't see any other raised hands. So, Mr. Wu, let me express gratitude to you for spending. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Min, please.
Yeah, I sorry I was late to the hearing. I missed your testimony, Mr. Wu, but I appreciate the report that we have. I guess I had two questions. One, I note in the report or the analysis that we were given that one of the reasons that it was described that potentially there was lower take-up, particularly in areas outside of the Bay Area, might have been the fact that GoBiz was focused so much more on the small business relief grants. And so have there been efforts, and perhaps I missed this in my reading of the analysis, to try to rectify that going forward? And then my second question is, and you may have already answered this, and if so, I apologize, what do you see as potentially the role of this rebuilding fund going forward as we emerge out of COVID? Is it something that we can continue to utilize at scale for different efforts? Is it something we can transition to other purposes? What do you see as the future of this particular program and some of the lessons you've learned?
Yeah, and on the first question with the California grant program, that had a number of different rounds, right? And so each time we prepared for the uptake in volume following the grant program, there was another tranche of grant funding made available, and so that kept getting extended. That somewhat conditioned the small business marketplace to believe that there would be new tranches forthcoming, and perhaps made them a little bit hesitant to sign up for a loan when they thought, hey, if I just wait it out, maybe there's another tranche of grant funding coming my way. And so So that will take time to be absorbed into the marketplace and kind of put to bed. But I think we're reaching that point right now. With the rebuilding fund, it was always envisioned when we were working with them at the outset that we could create permanent infrastructure that could come up with the right tailored products for the situation at the time, right? And so this first fund is going to come to its conclusion in June, and there's been discussions ongoing since last September between IBank and Calvert about what the second vehicle might look like for the current status of the marketplace and the current interest rate environment, the current needs of the small business community. And so that is just something that will be always at IBank conditioned to be prepared for, that we can access available funds, that we can allocate SSBCI funds or existing small business finance center funds to whatever the right initiative or entity or idea comes to our plate that best serves the needs of the time. And so we're very hopeful that the rebuilding fund continues forward, has ideas that they bring to the table to us for future funding and that meet the needs of the small business community.
Great, thank you very much. All right, going once. There's a hand up for Commissioner Bard, but he's not there. I think that's from the last time. Going once, going twice, done. All right, Mr. Wu, thank you very much for your testimony. And if we could also have the next witness.
Yes, thank you, Chair Nava. Our next witness is Ms. Beth Bafford, Vice President of Strategy at Calvert Impact Capital, which administers the Rebuilding Fund. In this role, Ms. Bafford leads efforts to build new products and services that accelerate private capital for the benefit of communities in the United States and around the world. Ms. Bafford, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. And whenever you're ready, you may please begin your testimony.
Thank you so much to the commission, to the commissioners for having us today. Rachel, I don't know if you're putting up the couple of slides. Perfect. Thank you. Just a few visuals that I thought would be helpful for the conversation today. Really pleased and excited to be here alongside Scott and Hilda and all of you to discuss the California Rebuilding Fund. My name is Beth Bafford. I'm Vice President of Strategy at Calvert Impact Capital, a nonprofit financial institution devoted to creating a more equitable and sustainable financial system and economy. I am based in the DC area, so I'm not a Californian, but have had the pleasure of working with partners across California and across about 18 states over the last 2 years to support small businesses throughout the pandemic. You can go to the first slide. I'm going to focus on 4 main things today in my verbal comments. I put a lot of the detail in the written testimony, but really wanted to drive home these 4 points today. As we all, I think, agree, small businesses are critical for the health of California, for the country, the economy, and our people. Access to credit is vital in building and growing a business for any size business. That CDFIs need to play a much larger role in expanding access to credit, particularly in this moment and going forward. And lastly, of course, that the Rebuilding Fund is a critical part of making that happen. So I think we all agree that the role of small businesses are essential in our economy. They not just bring community, quality jobs, new ideas, and competitiveness, but importantly for a lot of the small businesses that we work with, they bring a sense of independence and dignity and wealth building that is unmatched in our economy. Next slide. And just like you and I would struggle, or certainly I would struggle to buy a house without access to a mortgage, small businesses struggle to build and grow without access to credit. Access to credit is fundamental in thinking about how businesses can borrow and invest in themselves, their employees, their inventory, their innovation, so that we can cumulatively grow income and profit across the system. Next slide. And as you all may know, supply of credit for small businesses has been drastically declining over the last 15 years. So we all have saw an acute issue in the last 2 years because of the pandemic, but this is a trend that has been a long time coming. mostly due to the shifts in the financial system and the banking system across the US. So there's been a drastic reduction in banks, reduction in bank branches, and the share of loans that are made to small businesses for under $100,000 has fallen from 82% 15 years ago to 29% today. And so this problem is especially true for the smallest businesses across the state, particularly those owned by women and people of color who tend to have smaller businesses in terms of revenue size. And so addressing this supply issue is going to be critical if we want to think about equitable recovery going forward. CDFIs play a critical role in addressing this issue. So as everyone may know, the players who have aggressively moved into that credit gap tend to be the more predatory lenders, because they see this mismatch between supply and demand, and they are looking to profit off of it. Instead, CDFIs are really built for purpose. They're built to support this business community. They're built to support the smallest businesses, and do so not only with access to credit, but also access to support, to networks, to communities, to advice. And they lean in when most other financial institutions lean out, particularly in times of economic crisis. But unfortunately, CDFIs are very small. So when you look at just one bank, albeit a very large one, JP Morgan, JP Morgan's balance sheet is 17 times the entire CDFI industry. And that includes CDFI banks and credit unions. If you just looked at the loan funds, it would be a much smaller line on the left. But what we find very exciting is that does not always have to be the case, and that we have a real moment right now because of the focus, because of the spotlight shown on this challenge throughout the pandemic, and the public resources that are coming into the system. We think we can come out 10 years from now having this picture look much different. And so why are we here today to talk about the California Rebuilding Fund? We think the California Rebuilding Fund is a way to support the scaling of CDFIs as they look to play a much larger role in the financial system and support a much greater share of the state's small businesses. And the Rebuilding Fund was really built to create a supportive ecosystem around CDFIs, particularly nonprofit loan funds, to scale their lending. And it has three main pillars. One is the capital piece. So it is a loan purchase facility that buys 95% of every loan from the CDFIs to get maximum leverage off their balance sheets. That capital is provided by a blend of public, private, and philanthropic sources. Two is a technology platform, and this I think is also often underappreciated. That is an online marketplace that creates a very streamlined and friendly customer experience for the small business owners so that they can easily find and match with their local community lender. That technology is provided by a partner CDFI called Community Reinvestment Fund, and has been critical in supporting kind of marketing and outreach to small businesses, and providing a process that reduces confusion for small businesses, particularly during the pandemic, when small businesses were getting inundated with resources and ways to receive help. And then lastly, and importantly, has been mentioned today, a group of technical assistance providers who can really help the businesses get credit ready, pull together things like a P&L, bank statements, all the things that they need to access credit, and also support them if they're not able to access credit right now for some issue, and help them work through that issue so that they can get credit ready down the line. Those three pillars came together to create the California Rebuilding Fund program. This program was built for and by a very broad coalition of partners. You can go to, yeah, there we go. My fun logo slide. It started with 12 participating CDFI lenders across the state. We're excited to soon add 2 more, and a broad network of supporting partners. As Scott mentioned, folks like Cameo, Small Business Majority, a lot of the chambers, We have law firms and academics who have been extremely supportive, a group of impassioned volunteers who came together to really make this happen. And each organization has brought their own expertise, networks, relationships to build and design something that worked for California small businesses. And what does that look like from a capital side? As Scott mentioned, our job is really to structure and raise the capital. So we have created 2 loan purchase facilities. You can go to the next page. The first was really built to provide liquidity to the CDFI so they could leverage the Small Business Guarantee Program. The utilization of the guarantee program, as Scott mentioned, was limited in the beginning because of this lack of liquidity of the loan funds, and we wanted to allow them to be a larger participant in that program. So we successfully raised a $50 million liquidity facility from a group of private and public investors to encourage more lending. But as was mentioned, the deployment of that was slower than expected. And so the second facility that we were raising last year kind of slowed down the capital raise for that. And we are now ramping that back up in reaction to demand so that we can continue to bring in private capital to leverage the important commitment that IBank made to provide capital availability throughout the pandemic.
Ms. Bafford, could I ask you a
Yeah.
quick question?
Of course.
This kind of, I don't know if you heard the question earlier that I had with Mr. Wu, but on the previous slide that indicated the participating lenders and some of the people that are the supporting partners, this looks very centered around Northern California. And my question is, how do we broaden this coalition to disadvantaged communities like San Bernardino, Riverside, where I'm from?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. So the CDFIs are pretty broadly dispersed across the state. There's 4 that lend statewide, and then there's some that are focused on Northern California, some Central, and some Southern California. So we tried to have a broad group of lenders to make sure that there was presence across the state.
I do see AmPac on here, which is local to us, and I know Hilda's going to be testifying later today. Some of this, so obviously, as you know, they don't have the marketing budgets and the outreach budgets that are necessary to get out there. So when you have these supporting partners, like for instance, I own a law firm in Riverside and San Bernardino counties, and so we could be a supporting partner if we had if we knew who to talk to and how to give that outreach to people. So how do we get this message out there to the smaller communities? Because the concepts are excellent to try and provide lending to these disadvantaged communities and also teach them how to become bankable, but we don't. It seems like we just don't have the resources to get to these communities.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. I really appreciated the back and forth with Scott earlier. It's a mix of things. We have been trying to work with partners to do outreach to local communities. Our partners at Cameo and Small Business Majority have done train the trainers. So webinars training business support organizations all across the state. I think they've trained more than 400 local organizations on the Rebuilding Fund, what it is, how to access it, how to support small businesses through the process. We've held, I think, 3 at this point, local government convenings to try to get local government actors engaged and able to give them the tools that they need to do outreach. I honestly just feel like last year was just, everybody was a little bit overwhelmed. I think particularly the local governments with all of the resources that were coming from the feds last year, were just had a lot on their plates. And so I think what we have realized and learned and will continue to incorporate is that this can't be just a 1 or 2 or 3 time thing. It has to be a sustained effort to really make sure that we have a marketing and outreach plan that is a steady drumbeat over a long period of time. And that's where the resourcing really comes into play. And so we last year had to use some of our communications budget and agencies to support the Rebuilding Fund. And so that was the expense that Calvert took on. But we're a nonprofit financial institution. We don't have extensive budgets for that either. But we are now fundraising for that so that we can support marketing and a more dedicated marketing going forward. We also have a program like this in Washington State. And in Washington, they actually provided resources to hire a dedicated communications firm, an agency that has provided a really amazing support in terms of outreach with local partners, consistent messaging, a lot of rural outreach. They have partnerships with local organizations. And so we're testing things all over the country to see what works. And we're going to keep trying, keep getting out there and do our best to reach, every corner of the state as best as possible.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to interrupt. I just thought that slide was really impactful when I saw it. One other thing to consider, which that maybe, I don't know if it'll be helpful or not, but community foundations may be able to play a role in some of the outreach as well to some of these communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we've done a couple of conversations with the Association of California Community Foundations, but again, it's another example. I don't think we can just do it once. I think we need to have a sustained effort to make sure that we are consistently engaging and getting them the resources and tools they need to continue with that outreach. But I think community foundations is a great idea.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Let me offer a contribution at this point, because it just occurred to me that there are other examples that perhaps ought to be included. So all across the state, there are elected assembly representatives, and there are state senators. When I was in office, and I think Bill probably had the same kind of experience, as well as Senator Cannella and Senator Nielsen and Senator Min, but we would hold job fairs, and we would partner, we meaning my office, with the local Chamber of Commerce, who would then reach out to local employers. And then we would partner with a city or the county who would make a facility available, so it didn't cost anything. The burden then shifted to the individual businesses and to the chamber to set up, set up the tables and have the information and material. And then people could come in and sort of walk around and talk to folks about what kind of job opportunities were available. I do know that with earned income tax credits, it's very common for electeds to hold workshops in their communities in that same sort of way, where there are people who volunteer their services to help folks fill out the paperwork necessary for the earned income tax credit. It just seems to me that if there, and maybe you've already done it, but if there was an effort to connect with the local electeds to sponsor a free workshop that was available for business, small business, you could probably get support from an assembly representative, a member of the Board of Supervisors, City Council, the senator for that area, and end up having an event that is very low cost and that would help spread the word the way that Vice Chair Varner is talking about. And I see that I've done something right, maybe, because Commissioner Beyer, Commissioner Emerson, and then Senator Min, in that order, if you would please go ahead and speak.
Thank you, Chair Nava. Beth, among the banks who provided financing for the rebuilding fund are a couple of very, very large banks. And I know you want to praise them for that contribution, but there are quite a few who are missing. And there's very little, I think, frankly, zero money from corporate treasuries. And we have many California corporations who have literally tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions of dollars in their corporate treasury. What are the impediments to their participating in something like this, or for their philanthropic arms, the foundations of Bank of America or Wells Fargo or whatever, providing money for marketing as a brand effort? Because it seems like they've abandoned the field of small business lending because it's too complicated given their margins, et cetera. And yet they want to be seen as active participants in the community. So how can the nonprofit community do outreach to these large cap banks and companies in a way that encourages them to do the kinds of things Chair Nava is talking about, which would be developing a package where a member of the legislature would just have a kind of plug and play. Here's how you do an event. Here's the materials that you can put online, and you can do this once every 6 months. Help us understand how we could encourage that kind of activity.
Yeah, absolutely. All great questions. So I think to the banks, there's it kind of, I think I've spoken to probably 40 or 50 banks across California about the rebuilding fund. And so it just depends on different things. One, ironically, is a lot of them are consolidating currently. And so a lot of them are going through acquisitions. And so their kind of CRA shops are a little bit in tumult. Two, right now, as was mentioned, right, interest rates are rising. And so we're trying to see if we can be adaptive to that as kind of hurdle rates increase. And three, we like to say at Calvert, like the financial system is where innovation goes to die. This kind of financial structure, particularly for CDFIs, is new. And so a lot of banks don't have a framework to assess risk of an asset-backed structure like this. They are used to lending to a CDFI balance sheet, getting full recourse to that balance sheet, and they're not used to lending to their an asset-backed vehicle. And so we are getting ping-ponged around a lot of these large financial institutions to try to kind of see where we fit. And now are actually getting underwritten by some of their traditional asset-backed teams because they realize that it's more akin to that structure. So long way to say, working with a lot of financial institutions, but it's taking a lot of education. The corporates, most of them focused, again, I'll talk to many of them. Most of them focused last year on giving money away to their own kind of pet projects or issues. And so, it wasn't kind of plugging into something like this. And on the Treasury side, they tend to need something that is liquid. And so this is a less liquid vehicle than they're used to. And so there's some liquidity challenges. Some have been able to get around it, but some are still trying to do that. So we are still actively fundraising to banks, corporations, insurance companies, all sorts of institutional investors. But as I mentioned in my written testimony, the lessons that we've learned in the last 2 years have really led us to develop a different financing structure going forward so that we do not have these same challenges when we actually attempt to scale this work. In terms of the foundations, that's exactly what we're doing, but we're actually trying to raise money centrally, larger sums of money centrally, so that we can have a marketing budget for programs across the country. And so, and then I know our partners at Small Business Majority, Cameo, and others are also doing their own fundraising to support this. Kiva is doing fundraising to support this. So I think we're looking for resources wherever we can get them. I will say that the philanthropic community, has a lot of other issues, and small business post-COVID is not typically top of their priority list. Although the banks, you're right, the bank foundations do still care about this ecosystem.
So how can we improve the efficacy of the SSBCI money, $500 million to IBank, given the limitation that they have on marketing activities? In other words, we've got the money as a state, but we don't have the outreach to facilitate people knowing about the programs and leading them through this process to obtain loans to create financial stability in the long run, especially in light of inflationary pressures on interest rates.
Yeah, so SSBCI does come with an administrative budget that the state will access that is flexible, or certainly more flexible in its use. So I do not know, and I won't pretend to know, how that administrative budget is getting handled inside the state agencies. But the SSBCI comes with 5% of the first tranche and 3% of the second 2 tranches of capital can be used for administrative purposes, which can include marketing. And then we are trying to, like I said, just raise non-restricted funding to support marketing and communications overall. And then we're also, like Scott mentioned, we're also just trying to get creative, working with partners like Lendistry. We've got partnerships, or the platform that we use has new referral relationships with large commercial banks, so that every business that goes to a bank and gets turned down for a loan gets sent to this platform so that they have a chance of getting a loan from a CDFI. We're working with other online lenders, other online marketplaces to serve this population. So, there's more we can do with resources, but there's also a lot we can do through partnerships.
Commissioner Emerson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Bafford, for your presentation. I appreciate it. I noticed on some of the participating organizations, the Berkeley Haas School of Business is listed, but an institution like UCLA's Anderson School of Business is not listed. How would some organizations contact your organization to become a participant? Is there a contact information that they could contact you? Or
Yeah, absolutely. The commission has my email address. Happy to send it around. And just to clarify, a lot of the organizations that came together to support and design the rebuilding fund came together before I was engaged. It was a group of volunteers that came together from those various schools and various organizations. They then reached out to me because we were doing a similar program in New York. So I didn't bring that group together. I was certainly didn't mean to be exclusionary. It was kind of an organic group that came together to support the creation of the program.
all right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. We love working with students though. So any students we can bring into the work
Thank you.
brings fresh energy.
Senator Min.
Thank you, Chair Nava. And I just wanted to, I guess, reinforce your comments earlier. And we have done a lot of work with GoBiz on the SB 87 sort of COVID Small Business Relief Fund. And I know we'd be eager to, I think there'd be an appetite for joint efforts in my part of Orange County, just on collaborating to try to make people aware of what you have to offer. So, if that's of interest, we'd like to connect and see what we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was having, I think, multiple conversations with the county, actually, or Orange County, for a while to see how the county could support. And so I think there was a question about how different resources were being spent, but happy to re-engage there and would love to get the word out as
Yeah,
best as
and we did a
possible.
number of things on Zoom. We did things at different business conventions, and so we'd be happy to work with you on just doing that again. And I think that, and perhaps in collaboration with GoBiz, because they do obviously a lot of programming to reach out to those same audiences.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's another, point was made earlier, but GoBiz and the Office of the Small Business Advocate were really overwhelmed with the grant program last year, which we totally understand, trying to get free money out to businesses. And we're really excited to see if we could kind of reactivate that network to support outreach and education for the rebuilding fund going forward.
Thank you very much. And I have to leave for another meeting, so I apologize. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate your testimony.
Thanks, Senator Min. So if you, Ms. Bafford, do you have additional slides or information, or have we?
I just had a couple more, but you told me to be flattered if I was interrupted. So
Yeah, well, I hope you are.
I am flattered.
Good.
But if you want to put up, couple more. There we go. I think next slide is just really around who we're reaching to date. So just, despite the slower start, despite the kind of challenges with outreach, we're really excited by who we're reaching and the businesses that we're supporting. So we have made over 1,000 loans to small business owners. We are really reaching the very small businesses. 90% of them are fewer than 10 employees. 30% are sole props, which very, very often lack access to credit. And the businesses are in the communities and are kind of represent populations that are traditionally left out of the credit markets. And so we are excited about the reach and then certainly the stories. One of the things I mentioned in my written testimony is the kind of impact evaluation we're doing around these programs that we're excited to do in California soon, which is actually working with an evaluator to reach out and have conversations with the small businesses to really understand what access to credit means to them, why it's important, and how it improves both their quality of life and their employees' quality of life. And so we'd be happy to share those results when we have them with the commission so that we can continue to get better and get more responsive to the communities that we intend to serve. And then lastly, I just wanted to make a plug for continued support of this work. As has been mentioned, we are really seeing demand pick up as relief programs leave the market. And we know that supply of credit will continue to be challenged because all underwriters look backwards. And so the revenue and credit challenges the last 2 years are going to hurt business owners for years to come. And so we need to be aware of that as we create solutions. We are working with a broad coalition of partners to create these new and unique capital structures to get more efficient access to private capital and to really create the track record of lending and performance of these loans so that our reliance on subsidy reduces over time. And that's a really important piece of kind of building the market over time. And we have a kind of turnkey program. We're excited that it's flexible to add in new local governments, new investor types, new CDFIs. It is an infrastructure that was built to last. And so we're excited to leverage the flexibility of that infrastructure to make it a more permanent part of the landscape for all small businesses across the state. And that is it.
Very good, thank you. Let me canvass commissioners. Anybody else have any comments or questions before we go to our next witness? I don't see any. So, Ms. Bafford, thank you very much. You've been complimented by interruptions, and I hope you understand that actually represents a high level of interest by our commissioners. Thank you.
It's fantastic to be with you guys. Thank you.
Okay, so there's Rachel. Hello.
Hello, thank you, Chair Nava. Our final witness today is Ms. Hilda Kennedy, founder and president of AmPac Business Capital, which is a community development financial institution in the Inland Empire. AmPac Business Capital has been established for over 15 years and has funded more than $500 million in loans for small businesses. Many of you will remember that Ms. Kennedy previously testified to the commission in the fall of 2020 during our hearing series on COVID and small business recovery. Ms. Kennedy, welcome back to the commission. Thank you very much for being here today. When you're ready, you may please begin your testimony.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and thank you to the commission. Really honored to be here, and certainly honored to be in the company of Commissioner Varner from our district and area, and all of you. Thank you for the opportunity for me to discuss this important topic. As stated, I am Hilda Kennedy from AmPac Business Capital. And in my testimony, I want to focus on why we believe the 3 things about the California Rebuilding Fund. It's a critical tool for small businesses. It needs greater exposure, as you've already heard, and marketing, because we need to focus on recovery versus emergency support. And it needs to be expanded to regions like San Bernardino and Riverside County that really needs this critical tool. Now, on the slide that Beth showed, they noted recent additions, and AmPac was included in that, and I was grateful for this potential announcement. I had not gotten that full notification that we will be included, so I was grateful to see that. But my comments are centered around the fact that this region does need this kind of support, so I'm really grateful to see it. Since I last had the opportunity to speak before the commission, our office relocated to the city of Ontario, still in San Bernardino County. And as you know, this important county, San Bernardino and Riverside County, make up the Inland Empire. and the largest square mile of county space in the state of California. We relocated to our new office because in our strategic plan of 2017, we set goals to buy a building with office space so that we could not only support our office, but also create a one-stop shop for small businesses. We wanted to create an ecosystem where businesses could get coaching, training, and support, and then be connected to their local nonprofit mission-based lender on the same premises. So when we opened our office in November 2021, the AmPac entrepreneurship ecosystem was launched with partnerships, including the SBDC Women's Business Center SCORE and Cal State San Bernardino, IE Center for Entrepreneurship. We built out the space with state-of-the-art technology to host hybrid training sessions. And currently we hold weekly workshops in the space with our partners, including a small business boot camp. And it's important for me to give this background as I share with you the case that we've seen for how critical the California Rebuilding Fund is and critical that it reach all communities in the state of California. We've been hosting JP Morgan Chase in our building to do quarterly workshops with underserved communities, meeting with business owners in the business, having face-to-face dialogue, talking about how the business can scale and grow. Although in most instances, JP Morgan Chase is not going to fund those businesses because they're too small. We're doing a 4-week training program with Growing with Google, helping small businesses to scale. And then we've built an app, the AmPac Business Capital app, available on both Apple and Android platforms to provide an array of resources for small businesses right at their fingertip. We've worked with, our space provides drop-in space for these solopreneurs to be able to utilize a WeWork kind of environment where they can drop in, use a conference room, use a hot desk to be able to have other people to collaborate with and receive support. And we're expecting to serve thousands of small businesses right in this space. We're also an SBA partner, as many of you know, where we finance small businesses using the SBA 504 loan. We've been doing this for 15 years, and we've done about $1 billion in SBA loans, helping businesses to finance commercial real estate for their business, which really helps bring stability to the small business and helps them to create jobs and positive impact in the community. We're also a community advantage lender and micro lender. So again, we're helping businesses to scale. And because of the work that we did with PPP loans, we really got a clear eye of what's needed for small businesses. I'm sharing these experiences, commissioners, because the California Rebuilding Fund is an absolutely critical tool to support small businesses. And the IE region really needs to have this tool coupled with training, coaching, and technical assistance to support small businesses. In my written testimony, I quoted a report from Cal State San Bernardino School of Entrepreneurship, where they completed their first ever Voices of the Entrepreneur report in 2021. The report documented that the rate of new entrepreneurs in the Inland Empire region exceeds that of the nation in terms of national trends. The report acknowledges that coming out of the pandemic, they are uncertain if this new entrepreneur growth represents new distinct entrepreneurs or new business adventures from existing entrepreneurs or small businesses starting over after closing because of the pandemic. What we know is whichever one of those are true, there is going to be a critical need for capital And most banks, traditional banks, are not going to fill that void. The same report of Cal State San Bernardino documented that venture capital and angel investing in the IE region is woefully lacking. And so these early start businesses will not be able to walk into a bank and get capital. Again, the critical need for the California Rebuilding Fund. And quite frankly, I've talked to a number of businesses who are absolutely traumatized after their bank of 20 to 30 years could not support them during PPP when they needed the support the most. We're aware that affordable capital is critical for small businesses. And in times like this, in times of recovery, these businesses are vulnerable to the predatory lenders that cripple small businesses from scaling, and more often than not, position them to fail. That's why this tool of the California Rebuilding Fund is so important, because it provides affordable capital. And in this proposed legislation that's before Congress, the Small Business Disclosure Act of 2021, they predict that if these predatory lenders are held to accountability, disclosing rates and terms and APR and points to businesses, nearly 1 million small businesses could save $4.7 billion. Again, the reason that California Rebuilding is so important. I need to tell you, though, I've been on a number of panels on access to capital. You can imagine that since we provide capital to small businesses, I've talked to a number of partners on discussing access to capital with startup, emerging, and growing businesses in our region. And I can tell you for certain, this tool is not coming up as a solution. Although it has low interest rates, 3 or 5 year term, it's a secret to many businesses. And it's a secret to many deliverers of programs to small businesses. It needs to be exposed and expanded to more CDFI partners so that it can get to small businesses. You've already heard it. It's true. Because of the California Relief Grant, because of the economic injury disaster loans and PPP, small businesses wanted to access the free capital, the grants, versus a loan. Understandably, I think that there's a strategic opportunity, though, to promote this program and make sure that it gets in the hands of small businesses. And I'll just share a quick story, as I shared in my written testimony, about a small business owner who we were able to serve after he had taken advantage or got taken advantage of, however you want to look at that, with a predatory loan where they were taking funds out of his account every single day. And the reason I bring up these predatory lending practices is because small businesses and businesses in underserved communities, the studies show, are more vulnerable to that lending. And that's why this tool has got to be exposed better, expanded, and put in the hands of more people to deliver the information about this great tool to help small businesses to grow and to scale. Before getting our loan, this small business owner had exhausted his 401k, was taking money from his school teacher wife's account to make sure that he could pay the bills, and was up night after night because they were pulling the funds from him daily. We were able to provide a loan for him and refinance him out of that loan. And he came back to our staff just last week to say thank you and to describe the success of his insurance franchise and being recognized in the champion club and on track to be in the $1 million club, recognized worldwide in this franchise. CDFIs became celebrities during PPP. We serve so many businesses that their bank would not serve. And so I'll close again with 3 things. The California Rebuilding Fund is a critical tool for small businesses to help in recovery and to shield against this rising interest rate environment and inflation to help businesses get on track. The California Rebuilding Fund needs to be exposed now that these other programs are not available to promote the economic recovery that's necessary as we try and get back on track. And finally, the California Rebuilding Fund needs to be expanded so that more CDFIs across the state, and especially in the Inland Empire region, which we're really pleased about what we saw on that screen, to make this tool available to small businesses. A lot is at stake for small businesses and our local economies, and we need to ensure that this effective tool is available to give these innovators and job creators the resources they need to provide services in our communities and jobs to our families. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. And before I go to Vice Chair Varner, I would just say, look, you've got a real fan with Vice Chair Varner. He speak, and when he does speak of you, it's always in glowing terms, and I think it's well deserved. But I want to make a comment directed to staff, because what it sounds to me like, and for a while when I was in the Assembly, I was the chair of the Banking Committee, and we always had issues where banking representatives would talk to us about how the field was occupied primarily by the feds. There was some limited work that we could do on the part of the state. But I think that while predatory lending and what they are doing may be legal, it doesn't make it right. And I think we ought to spend some part of our report in identifying the harm caused by predatory lending, flush that out with some personal stories about people who are using their retirement funds and undoubtedly their children's college funds if they were able to set any aside. And let's see if we can identify what the state can do to discourage predatory lending, to make practices more transparent, and if necessary, to figure out whether or not there are penalties that should be imposed on people who abuse the system in order to extract money from business owners. Part of the difficulty, Ms. Kennedy, that we're going to have is when you say that under the Small Business Disclosure Act, that small businesses could save $4.7 billion. That's why it's going to be difficult to fix, because that's $4.7 billion that are going to people that shouldn't be getting it. And having said that, let me turn to Vice Chair Varner, and then let's go to Commissioner Garcetti. But first, Vice Chair Varner.
Hi, Hilda.
Hi.
You know how much respect I have for you, and I really appreciate all that you do in this field. And I do want to also mention that some people, I think people know, but I just make the point that you do a lot more than just lending. You actually mentor a lot of these small businesses, and you do so much to help level the playing field for these small businesses, especially in the underserved communities where we live. So thank you so much for that. You touched on it a little bit, and I really was pleased to hear about Chase Bank being within your building, that you could get them involved. But what about the two areas that I'd like to understand a little bit more about? Are we doing anything to outreach to some of the more local banks like American Business Bank, Civic Premier, which isn't really local anymore, but it's a bigger bank now. But some of these local banks, are they getting involved? And the other aspect I'd like you just to comment on is, if you heard the testimony earlier about the cities of San Francisco and Santa Clara actually put funds up to leverage the rebuilding funds in those areas, which I'm sure provided some sort of market awareness to some of these small businesses that existed. Are we doing anything of that in our communities?
Thank you so much for the question, Commissioner Varner. And of course, I'm your fan too. So let me take your first question in terms of American Business Bank or Pacific Premier Bank. Yes, we are very much so in conversation. I can brag about American Business Bank because what they did is directed some of their PPP fees that they receive from doing PPP loans to grants. In fact, we administered that grant on their behalf. And when I talked about that in my written testimony, we did administer that grant. We got several thousand people interested in that grant, and it went to women, minority, and underserved communities. And so I want to offer kudos, since you gave me the opportunity and fed that to me. They did some great work, and people were very grateful. And what we did with that grant is we said, we're not just giving out a grant, we're going to give some training to go along with it. And what was remarkable about that effort is we had over 470 people join a webinar, minimum 470, for 3 sessions in a row, to not only learn that they were competing for less than 100 grants, but they wanted the knowledge. So that's why CDFIs are so important in this mix, because we provide the training and education and support, as well as the funds. And to your, the second question in terms of, I'm having a moment, a mature moment. The second question was
just on how local cities or counties are if they're engaged in providing funds to leverage the California Building Fund.
Right. I think that there's some great opportunity for that. We're administering a program with Economic Development Administration funds with Riverside County, a 3.75% loan at over a 5-year term. And we are getting really great traction with that program. And we're doing the grant program with San Bernardino County. So I would imagine our local cities and counties could definitely come together if we are a partner in this program to make that available, like the San Francisco market, and drop that interest rate down to 0%. I'm very impressed by the work as well.
Good. All right. Thank you. Commissioner Garcetti.
Thank you. Ms. Kennedy, thank you very much for introducing yourself to me. The others know you. I am really honored to know you. You are an extremely articulate, compassionate, and very persuasive individual. And I hope you keep it up for your community, because we all benefit by your focus and your continuing focus. The 2 other things, I was going to bring up what our president brought up, and that is that our staff needs to focus on the predatory lenders as part of any report that we write. You might be able to help us, giving us some other examples that you included in your talk and in your paper, because that kind of story is very persuasive to elected officials and to the public in general, where it's a human being. You can go and talk to that human being, and you can see how he or she is suffering. It's not just about losing a business. It's losing a family. All kinds of really tough, horrible things come from that kind of a situation. And we have to bring it home to both elected officials and the greater community. So I want to thank you for emphasizing that. The last thing, I didn't expect this. I'm somewhat of a new member of the commission, and you've just given me an idea, and you're going to be the first one. I'm going to start a list or a book of unknown heroes and you're the first one on that list. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I don't know if it's appropriate, but I think that comment on the predatory lenders, we can bring faces to that because our client, hearing him talk about how it affected he and his wife and their marriage, it's so much bigger than just these dollars.
Yeah.
It's communities that can be impacted, because if you split a family, you're destroying community. And so it's a really important matter.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, Commissioner Garcetti, like me, having once been a prosecutor, it never goes away. And
Right.
there's a part of our makeup, having done that kind of work and having had experience with people who have been victimized by others. It never leaves you, and you do become sensitive to how widespread the harm is when things like predatory lending intrude into the family, and how corrosive it is to the community, and and just how extraordinarily offensive it is when you have people who are hardworking. You know, they come up with a product that they can put together, if they're in food services or whatever it is, and they take the best of their abilities to do that. And then on the one hand, they have to navigate the financial system, which is loaded with all kinds of trapdoors and complications and absolutely foreign to so many people. They know what they want to do. They know what they can do. They have all the ability and all the skill and all the desire and all the ingenuity and all the creativity. And then they need people like you to help them navigate that. And then to have on the other side, these maggots, oh, did I say that out loud? that engage in predatory lending, and they're vampires who suck that out of them. They're horrible people. And we shouldn't have any sympathy for them whatsoever. And I'm glad that I share this platform with Commissioner Garcetti, because I think we have a little bit of an insight about how damaging this can be. And I just want to make one other reference that I should have brought up when I was talking with Beth Bafford. And I made reference to workshops with legislators in their communities. And I would suggest to her, and I doubt that it has been done, in the legislature, there are caucuses. So there's a Republican caucus, there's a Democratic caucus. And if I were in a position to want to promote the idea of the lending in the CDFIs, I would ask of the Senate Pro Tem and of the Assembly Speaker to be able to make a brief presentation to the assembled caucuses and have my leave behinds, my documentation, my paperwork, so that you can sit with 80 members of the legislature, however you want to divide it. The Democrats in one room, Republicans in another, although sometimes Democrats and Republicans actually do sit in the same room, and make the presentation about, we're here for you. We can help small businesses in your districts, and you get them all at once. And all that work ends up going to a staff person anyway, because having been a member, I understand that the hard work is done by staff. And that's just another way to reach a very specific audience of people who have influence in the community. But having said that, let me take a look at my commissioners to see whether or not anybody else has any questions or comments at this juncture. Although I'm looking at Commissioner Sidley, and I just can't stop looking at that bear. And I saw with Commissioner Emerson, there was either a dog or a cat in the background, but that's what happens with these Zoom calls. Commissioner Sidley, you're unmuted.
Well, I am golden, Chairman Nava. I am a golden bear, so that bear is always here. And you pointed out, I just want to say, Hilda, it was extraordinary to hear what you had to say, and I am such a fan of the vice chair, Varner, who is your total fan. So I'm part of the fan club. So thank you again for your testimony today. It was very appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you
Very
very
good.
much.
That's all, Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no further questions or comments from commissioners. Very grateful for your testimony, Ms. Kennedy, and I'm sure that we'll be talking to you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now to Ethan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we can now move into the public comment portion of the agenda. And actually, public comment is the last portion of the public hearing agenda, and then the first portion of the business meeting agenda. So I would invite any members of the public who wish to make public comment on the rebuilding fund or on other topics to do so now. If you have zoomed into the meeting, please use the raised hand feature in Zoom. Just raise your hand. That's the best way to let us know you wish to make public comment. If you have phoned in, send an email to littlehoover@lhc.ca.gov. That address is on your screen now, Little Hoover, all one word, at lhc.ca.gov. Do so immediately and give us your phone number so that we know who to unmute if you're called upon to make public comment. If you do make public comment, commissioners will be able to hear you but not see you while you speak, and public comment per the commission's traditional practice is limited to 3 minutes per speaker. So please limit your comments to three minutes. So again, if you have joined the meeting by Zoom, just raise your hand or send us an email. And at this time, I will ask Ashley if we have any members of the public who have indicated they wish to make public comments.
Yes, we have a few people lined up, starting with Bianca Bloomquist. Bianca, I'm turning on your ability to speak.
Hey there, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak a little bit about Small Business Majority's role in the California Rebuilding Fund since its inception in November of 2020. So as members of the commission may know, Small Business Majority is fully committed to addressing the historic and systemic barriers that small business owners, particularly business owners of color, women business owners, and rural business owners face when accessing responsible capital to start and grow their business. We have been a supporter of the California Rebuilding Fund since the beginning. We participated on the case task force way back in the early days of the pandemic, specifically because we recognized immediately the potential that the California Rebuilding Fund serves to fundamentally transform the small business lending landscape for small business owners. I have a couple stats here, but I think I'm going to make sure that other folks have enough time to speak. But let it just be known that even before the pandemic, almost a quarter of small business owners have indicated to Small Business Majority that they didn't have an account with a bank or a credit union. This was pre-pandemic. And of course, the number is unfortunately higher for those business owners of color. Business owners of color obtain less financing than their white counterparts by over 10 percentage points. And 1/4 of small business owners overall have said in their small business experience that they've been denied a loan. So the potential for the California Rebuilding Fund is huge. And knowing this, we've been working hard to educate the public about the Rebuilding Fund, working with our partner organizations to host educational workshops and presentations to small business owners. We have conducted more than 45 educational workshops and presentations to small business owners throughout the state. As Beth mentioned in her testimony, we have conducted a handful of workshops to local government leaders, economic development managers, folks who work in city governments to see the opportunity that the California Rebuilding Fund holds in investing in their local communities, particularly given the state small business credit initiative dollars coming from the federal government, as well as the American Rescue Plan dollars that are coming down the pike to local governments as well. So that being said, Beth did talk about how small business owners have requested almost $1.3 billion in loans. This indicates a strong need for long-term recovery capital that's both affordable and accessible for small business owners. We've seen 3,340 new applications from pre-screened businesses since the beginning of February. The need is here. The outreach that we are doing is working, but we look forward to working with the commissioners on.
Ms. Blomquist, you've reached your 3 minutes. If you can wrap up quickly, please.
Got it. We look forward to working with the commissioners to continue to raise awareness about the program in your districts, and we will reach out to you following the hearing. So thanks so much.
Great, thank you, Bianca. I'm now turning over to Pamela Deans. Pamela, I'm turning on your ability to talk. Pamela, you're on mute.
Sorry, great. Thank you so much. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Pamela Deans. I am the Executive Director for the Micro Enterprise Collaborative of Inland Southern California, a nonprofit organization. Thank you so much for allowing this opportunity to support the small businesses in our community. We serve as the portal of small business support and resources in Inland Southern California, including San Bernardino and Riverside counties, connecting small business owners to the help and support they need to start and run successful businesses. Over 700 banks, chambers of commerce, business associations, and nonprofits, as well as universities, community college business departments, and business programs, services, micro lenders, city and county agencies understand the importance of successful small businesses for the economy of the region and have signed on to become partners of the Micro Enterprise Collaborative. Micro enterprise is those with fewer than 5 employees, comprise 90% of all businesses, and provide 23% of all jobs. These smallest of businesses create income for business owners and their families, as well as well-paying jobs within the region. However, micro business owners need the information, expertise, and capital to grow and succeed. I've heard it several times mentioned today throughout the speakers and different times that how do we get the word out about the CDFIs? I'm pleased to share Micro Enterprise Collaborative has the reach to help get the word out. We do offer a small business assistance tool for small business owners to access service providers and micro lenders that provide training, counseling, and microloans on our website, microbizinsocal.org. The California Rebuilding Fund should be targeted towards business owners in historically under-resourced communities such as San Bernardino and Riverside County, where more than 2 in 3 recipients are small businesses owned by women and people of color. We also know that Riverside County was recently ranked #1 as the fastest growing county in California, making it more critical than ever for resources. So in closing, I would like to urge the members of the commission to ensure future federal funds and state funds are invested into the fund to fill credit gaps for the hardest to reach business owners who will struggle with access to capital for years to come. With that, thank you again for the opportunity to speak today, and I appreciate it.
Great, thank you, Pamela. Next, we're moving on to Claudia Vaya. Claudia, I'm turning on your ability to speak.
Thank you. And thanks, commissioners. My name is Claudia Veek, and I'm the Advocacy Director for the California Women Business Center Network, which consists of 16 programs throughout our state, from Siskiyou County in the far north to down to San Diego and Imperial counties in the south. So I came today to express support for the continuation of the California Rebuilding Fund, because the Rebuilding Fund's terms are more favorable to women business owners who historically and still today struggle to gain access to capital. Less than 4% of women of commercial loans go to women. 18% of SBA loans go to women. Much better, as we saw through Beth's statistics, almost 50% of CDFI loans go to women, but again, is very small scale. And I also wanted to respond to Commissioner Nava and the rest of your interest in predatory loans and reinforce what Hilda Kennedy said, that there really has been a migration to online lenders, many of whom were predatory and not transparent during the last few years. And the Federal Reserve Small Business Credit Survey reported, and this was last year, that 32% of the small businesses reported using online lenders. And we know that they are women-owned and minority-owned businesses because those businesses are not getting assistance from traditional financial institutions. It might be another good session to have in the future. Anyway, I wanted to get back to what women's business centers are doing and connect that to the California Rebuilding Fund. As you know, women were disproportionately affected during the pandemic, leaving workforce in droves, and this is true for women business owners too. Our women's business centers more than doubled the numbers of women served during the pandemic, and they were able to help almost 3,000 women business owners to access grants and loans, including the California Rebuilding Fund. Women's business centers are one of the critical pipelines of borrowers benefiting from the fund, and we are still living in a pandemic economy. So I'm urging you as Commission to support the continued investment in the California Rebuilding Fund with money, incoming federal money from the SSBCI, which I know you spoke about earlier. Thanks very much for your time today.
Thank you, Claudia. Next, we're moving on to Emily Glassner. Emily, I'm turning on your ability to speak.
Hello, thank you so much. I'm Emily Gassner. I represent Cameo, which is a statewide network of 350 organizations who are both lenders to small businesses as well as assistance providers to small businesses. And Cameo has partnered with the California Rebuilding Fund since its inception, and we strongly believe in its positive impact in our communities for getting the much needed affordable, accessible capital to the small businesses in California. And what we're seeing is strong and increasing demand for this lending facility. So I just wanted to reiterate that since 2020, we've had more than 20,000 small business applicants who have been matched with the participating CDFI lenders in the program. We also have seen 1.3 billion in loans that have been requested from these small business owners. And as Bianca mentioned earlier, in the last 2 months alone, more than 3,300 new applications have been received from businesses who have gone through a pre-screening process already. And I feel that the fund is really reaching high potential yet under-resourced small businesses, in that more than 2 of 3 loan recipients are small businesses owned by women and people of color, which is really important in terms of the impact of the fund. At Cameo, we feel it's extremely crucial that small businesses continue to receive additional loans and resources to recover from the pandemic. According to Harvard University, 39.1% of California's small businesses that closed during the business have not reopened, which is a staggering statistic. And Cameo is concerned that current funding for this successful program is going to run out by the end of this year. So we strongly urge the Commission to please ensure that future federal and state funds are invested into the California Rebuilding Fund. We believe that this successful program needs to continue long-term because we have to fill the significant and pervasive access to capital gap that exists and continues to exist for under-resourced small businesses. Because these California businesses create jobs and better lives, not only for the business owners and their families, but their employees and communities as well. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Emily. And now we're moving on to Aaron Vong. Aaron, I'm turning on your ability to speak.
Hello, sorry, I had to unmute myself. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to provide remarks on the California Rebuilding Fund. I'll try to keep this short as I very much echo much of what the panelists have already shared. My name is Erin Vong, and I am the Policy Communications Manager at Acción Opportunity Fund. Acción Opportunity Fund is one of the nation's leading CDFI small business lenders, and we are members of the original CASE task force that created CARF. In addition to providing affordable capital, we also offer technical assistance and coaching resources. We're also strong advocates for our small business owners, pushing forth for more funding and resources for them, as well as protections like small business truth and lending bills. Since announced by Governor Newsom in November of 2020, Acción Opportunity Fund has provided over $31 million in CARF loans to hardworking entrepreneurs throughout the state. And with backing from this program, our clients like Carol, who owns a shoe store in Berkeley, they were able to pivot to online sales at a time when brick and mortar stores were suffering the most. The fund has been effective in providing capital to the small business owners hit hardest by the pandemic. In fact, 2 out of 3 small business owners in the program identify as women or people of color. But as it stands, current funding is estimated to run out before the end of the year. Acción Opportunity Fund asks that members of the commission ensure that future state and federal funds are invested into CARF with ample funding allotted for marketing and outreach. In doing so, we believe we can ensure a more equitable long-term recovery for all of California's small business owners. Thank you so much for your time.
Great, thank you, Erin. We have no additional requests for public comment on Zoom and no additional requests for public comment via email. Oh, we just got a couple more come up on Zoom. So next we're moving on to Preet. Preet, I'm turning on your ability to speak.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you, commissioners, for this opportunity. My name is Preet Alawalia. I'm the Special Programs Director with Northern California Small Business Development Centers, also known as SBDC. The California Rebuilding Fund has been a great alternative funding source for our clients in NorCal when all other banks weren't lending to such businesses. Also, this program has been great for our clients that did not get the California Relief Grant and needed a little extra money to get their businesses over the pandemic hump. Thank you for this opportunity and encourage the state to continue to funding programs like this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Preet. Next, we're moving on to Chris. Chris, I'm turning on your ability to speak.
Ashley, is Chris muted on his or her end? Do we know?
Chris, you're up.
I think I'm unmuted now. Can you hear me now, commissioners?
Yes.
We can.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to speak briefly. My name is Chris Horton. I'm with Northern California SBDC as well. I have 2 capacities. I'm one of the regional lending specialists, so I get a chance to work with small businesses looking to access capital. Had a lot of work, some long weeks, and working with folks during the pandemic. And the California Rebuilding Fund has been a great vehicle for us to provide much needed capital for our small businesses. On the other side, I'm the director of the Inclusivity Project, which is an initiative that's focused on supporting Black and African-American entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs, and veteran entrepreneurs. The California Rebuilding Fund provides essential small business loans to often struggling ventures, beyond capital infusion that allow mom and pop owner-operators to move past obstacles, expand their organizations, as well as retain and create new jobs. At the end of the day, small businesses are successful when they can obtain the funding they need for their small businesses. Through the California Rebuilding Fund and at the right lender, small businesses have obtained the capital they need to start, build, grow, or save their businesses. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak.
Great, thank you so much, Chris. And then we have no additional requests for public comment on Zoom or email.
Thank you, Ashley. So, Mr. Chairman, if we can, we will now transition into the business meeting portion of this meeting. And again, members of the public, if you wish to make public comment before we close the public comment session, you must raise your hand immediately. You may make comment on any topic.